if there is any evidence that anyone affiliated with the Trump campaign communicated with the Russian government in the course of this campaign, what will you do?
I have been called a surrogate at a time or two in that campaign, and I did not have communications with the Russians. Meetings with Russian operatives or Russian intermediaries about the Trump campaign. That is the question I responded to. I did not respond by referring to the two meetings, one very brief after a speech, and one with two of my senior staffers, professional staffers, with the Russian ambassador in Washington, where no such things were discussed. My reply to the question of Senator Franken was honest and correct. I have recused myself in the matters that deal with the Trump campaign.
Attorney General Jeff Sessions recusing himself as this investigation continues at the Justice Department, the FBI. Of course, there are investigations in the House and Senate Intelligence Committee as well about possible contacts or even collusion with the Russians before the election with the Trump campaign. A lot of pushback on this from Republicans, but we are getting word. Meetings that the White House put out now saying that that then NSA-to-be, National Security Advisor-to-be, Michael Flynn, met with Ambassador Kislyak. There you see the second person, that's the Russian ambassador. Also, Jared Kushner met with the Russian ambassador in that same meeting. And then, obviously, you're hearing about the Attorney General's meeting. He was a senator back then in September, a one-on-one meeting and another group meeting. This has caused quite a stir here in Washington. And from Sessions, after his testimony, he also received a questionnaire from Senator Leahy in which he was asked specifically a written questionnaire about Russian ties. And have you been in contact with anyone connected to any part of the Russian government about the 2016 election, either before or after Election Day? And his response, as you see there, is no. So, what about all of this? Let's bring in our panel. Charles Lane, opinion writer for the Washington Post. Katie Pavlich, news editor at townhall.com. And Chris Steyerwalt is politics editor here at Fox News. Katie, your thoughts on this? There are some people who are saying this is heads are exploding and people are going, way over on this thing. And others are saying, wait a second, maybe he didn't tell the truth in that statement.
The heads exploding, unfortunately, seems to be a normal practice when it comes to responding to stories about Russia and President Trump. Look, the White House is there to try and show that this is a normal process that took place during the transition with members of the campaign as part of a normal way to reach new relations with Russia. When you look at the details of the question that Senator Franken asked, he himself keeps saying, this is brand new information. If this is true, if there is evidence, so far, after months of reporting on this issue, we have seen no evidence that there is any wrongdoing here. These seem like normal meetings. There's information about meetings that were held, and yes, some of them maybe weren't disclosed, but there's no information about wrongdoing, and these seem to be just normal processes. And yes, Senator Sessions, Attorney General Sessions now, could have saved himself a lot of trouble today by simply following up on that question and saying, well, in my capacity as the chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, I did have this meeting. But in terms of this being some kind of out of the ordinary issue when he met with dozens of ambassadors last year, seems to be overblown.
Chris, I get all these tweets and Facebook posts about, why are you covering it? It's fake news. There's not there. But, I mean, you did have the Attorney General recuse himself today. It is news. And there is that question about, why doesn't he remember that meeting in September when Russia is in the forefront of the election news at that moment? And why doesn't he clean it up afterwards and say, you know what, I forgot about this meeting. Yeah. I met with the ambassador.
Well, first of all, never check the mentions. This is not a day to check your mentions. This is just don't do it. Look, on the issue of Russia, the Trump administration has to be cleaner than Caesar's wife. There is no room for error anymore because they've had a couple of oopsies, right? We had the Flynn oops, we had the Paul Manafort, we had Carter Page, there's this concatenation, and to Katie's point, there's no allegation that they colluded with the Russians to hack or disseminate the hacked material from the Democratic campaign email accounts. There's no allegation of any wrongdoing. But when you get enough stinka-roonies in a row, then you say, and this is what the president essentially has to say, whether he uses the means of a special counsel or whatever he does. He says, no more mistakes on Russia. We're not going to, this administration cannot afford any more mistakes on Russia because it feeds into the Democratic narrative that he is a puppet and that the election was stolen, so they just can't screw up anymore.
I know, but you open the door to a special counsel and then it opens a lot of doors, as we've seen many times before.
Well, look, execute a fair-minded inquiry, have it over with, or you could end up with a special prosecutor. You can end up with real terror at the end of this thing. They have to, whether it's through a special counsel or whatever means they take, they have to clean house and be done.
Just for people at home, explain the difference. One would be the White House reaching out to say some independent look at this to kind of collaborate everything, and the other is Congress initiated and
court ordered, and
Ken Starr finds out something else.
You start. Check us out and tell us what you find.
Chuck.
Well, good luck in the current anybody who has what you call credibility on both sides of the aisle. I mean, I don't think we live in such a world anymore, and that's part of our problem, is that whatever the truth is here, there's really nobody who's viewed as an honest broker for finding it out. On Jeff Sessions, he said, let me be clear. He doesn't seem capable of making himself very clear on this issue, and that's where all the problems started. This whole exchange with Al Franken has me completely baffled in terms of just the aptitude of Jeff Sessions, who should know better. He was asked a hypothetical question. If such and such is true, what would you do? The only thing you say in response to a especially if you're under oath, is I can't answer hypothetical
he clearly screwed up the answer, but he didn't clean it up.
Yeah.
Right.
So, but what about the overall, the fact that we don't have any fire yet, and everybody's chasing smoke? Do you know how many reporters the Washington Post has on the Russia story?
Not personally, but
I think it's like 10.
Well, you have better sources at the Post than I do. But to be serious about it for a minute, it would be a pretty big deal if there had been any kind of even pretty arm's length cooperation or, intermingling between a U.S. presidential candidate and a foreign government like Russia.
Right.
I think, and there's all these meetings that, we just discovered another one today. So it does seem like it's worth the effort to find it out.
Right. But I guess what I'm pointing to is what we know so far, and that is the intelligence community does this scrub before they leave in November and December. This is CIA Director Brennan, DNI Clapper, and let's play Paul Ryan. This is SOT 5.
They did an investigation, intelligence community-wide. Many of us went down and got the briefings from Clapper and Brennan after the election, before the inauguration, and never have we ever seen any evidence presented to us that an American or a person in the Trump campaign was involved or working with the Russians.
So at what point, obviously these investigations continue, but there has to be a clearing of the deck, otherwise it continues in eternity.
Well, and I think it goes back to what Chris said about the president being able to sit everyone down and say there will be no more mistakes on this issue. And actually the president making a very clear statement about how the Russians do not have the best interest in mind when it comes to U.S. elections. The conclusion from the intelligence report that was made was there were no votes changed, but there was a Russian propaganda campaign waged against the United States in order to undercut our faith in democracy. They're doing it now in Europe.
Don't deny that.
Right.
Right, yes.
And I also think that one thing that they can do as well is try to clean up the timeline here. So when people are saying at the height of the WikiLeaks saga and allegations of Russian interference, yes, that happened when Senator Sessions met with the Ukrainian ambassador, and then a week later, they came up with the ceasefire that Russia then accepted. So they were probably there discussing the ceasefire, and it doesn't help that today Attorney General Sessions said he couldn't remember what they talked about. If he could remember those details, he would help himself.
Let's just play SOT 4. We're going to talk about this in the other panel, but let's play SOT 4 here from Sessions today.
I thought he was pretty much of an old style Soviet type. To listen to him, nothing that Russia had done nothing that was wrong in any area, and everybody else was wrong with regard to the Ukraine. It got to be a little bit of a testy conversation at that point. Most of these ambassadors are pretty gossipy, and they liked, this was in the campaign season, but I don't recall any specific political discussions. I don't recall having met him before those two meetings.
Talking about meeting with the Russian ambassador. We're going to have more about this and the political fallout. What comes next after a quick timeout?
What the hell's going on here? Why is everybody lying?
I think Democrats are letting their hair on fire to get you to cover this story, to kind of keep repeating the same story.
Already, his integrity and independence has been questioned. It would be better for the country if he'd resign.
A lot of my friends somehow believe the Russians managed to manipulate the election, and somehow, President Trump is sort of a Manchurian candidate.
I remind you that this Congress impeached a president for something so far less.
It was really amazing today, looking at the reaction on all sides about this story as it started to break about Senator Sessions, now Attorney General Sessions, recusing himself. Everyone wanted to get in on it. Senator Claire McCaskill tweeted, "I've been on the Armed Services Committee for 10 years. No call or meeting with Russian ambassador ever. Ambassadors call members of Foreign Relations Committee." The problem for Senator McCaskill was that she did meet with the Russian ambassador, and there's a picture of her meeting with the Russian ambassador, and that was not the only meeting. There were other meetings in which she met, and then she came out and said, well, I couldn't fit one-on-one in the Twitter posts. I ran out of characters, and that's why the clarification was needed. This is what happened in Washington today. We're back with the panel. Chris, you wonder where it goes from here.
Well, no matter what happens, the Democrats are going to stay on this. They have gotten they've gotten a scalp and a half. They got Mike Flynn, and they've got Sessions to recuse himself. So they're going to stay after this because there is, as Paul Ryan said, great profit in it for them. This is supposed to be a day where the administration is focusing on glorying in the president's speech from Tuesday and his visit to the new aircraft carrier, and they had this all choreographed, and instead they gave the Democrats this marvelous opportunity. But if Jeff Sessions had recused himself on day one, this wouldn't have happened. And this is something that I don't understand. This is the part where I'm stuck. Why would Jeff Sessions want to be any part of this investigation from Jump Street? Why doesn't the administration, I guess they probably will now, take a point of view that says we are just going to jump out in front of this thing and we're not going to be playing catch up anymore?
Well, that may be why you're hearing from the White House about the Jared Kushner and Mike Flynn meeting in December, which is fairly innocuous to an incoming transition team to be meeting with the Russian ambassador. Look at this poll, Chuck. Fox News poll just out tonight. Message you would send to those protesting President Trump. And it's 53-44, time to move on. And there you see the breakdown, men and women. These investigations are not stopping. But there is a sense, perhaps, of a tiring of it.
We'll see. The Democrats feel again, both parties here, but especially the Democrats and the opposition, are gearing all their messaging to their base. Okay, they're not pursuing this story because they're trying to win over some wavering mass of voters in the middle. This is all about maintaining and stoking the base. This is a huge issue in the Democratic base. Any Democrat who stood up right now and said, you know what, let's keep this all in perspective, right, would be shot down. Mind you, there are some Republicans, we all know their names, who are kind of concerned about this too, and don't quite know what to think about the fact that we have a president of the United States who has a kind of mysterious affinity for Vladimir Putin, who has said nasty things about just about everybody in the world in politics except for that one guy. And there's a puzzle there. And it would be, I think, a great relief privately to many Republicans in national politics if they could finally figure out what really went on. I think they all believe it's probably benign, but they want some answers.
All right, quickly, Kate.
Well, I think the Trump administration as a whole needs to get their people into place. They're doing a lot of micromanaging at the deputy level in a number of these agencies, and as long as there isn't someone in charge trying to navigate and manage the leaks, they're going to continue to see these problems, and they better get ready, because if you think that Attorney General Jeff Sessions is the end of the list, you are mistaken, and this will continue forward despite there being no evidence of any kind of real wrongdoing.
We'll see. And that's it for the panel. Up next, a lesson from Senator Rand Paul. Finally tonight, Senator Rand Paul went to the office of House Republican Conference Chairwoman Kathy McMorris Rodgers in an effort to read the still incomplete health care replacement bill. He's told the bill's not in the room, he was not invited. It's a stunt, yes, but the senator considered it BYOC, bring your own copier.
Allowed to be in this area.
No, that's correct. We can be in this area. No, this is an open hold. We can be in this area.
No, we brought our own copy machine too, but we didn't get to use it. We're assuming it's several hundred pages long. We brought our copy machine in case they would let us copy the bill, but it looks like we're not going to be able to copy it.
And the copier went back to Senator Paul's office. Thanks for inviting us into your home tonight. That's it for the special report. Fair, balanced.